Another dangerous misconception is evidenced in the commonly used term releases an extraordinary amount of energy. Energy is not released. What actually happens is that potential is released, not energy, and that means expansion. Atomic fission helps matter to explode instantly instead of decaying over long periods. Released energy means quick expansion, and quick expansion into the universal vacuum is the death process of any kind of material body, whether it be iron, carbon, or a human blood corpuscle. That conception, which gives to energy the quality of expanding or contracting, is one of the continuing factors to the deadliness of radioactivity as a power for man's use. Energy is changeless. It is the eternal vacuum of the zero universe, God's universe. To confuse the compressive power of electricity to create potential for the purpose of simulating energy with energy itself is extremely unfortunate. If radioactivity ever came into general use, there would be thousands of planes continually discharging ultramicroscopic particles by the billions per square mile. Thousands of ships would do likewise and kill every fish in the sea in time. Hundreds of reactor plants would make it impossible for you to eat any untainted food whatsoever. Such a thing as the normal food you are accustomed to would soon be as impossible for you as it is for the cow, which is now compelled to eat contaminated grass to make into the milk that you drink and the beef you eat. I want to interject something here. I looked it up, and there are, at this time, over 400 nuclear power plants in operation around the world. Let us now, to resume, let us make clearer to you what we mean by the ability of metals like lithium, sodium, calcium, or strontium to expand within you and hasten your death. A metal like iron or gold cannot hurt you from outside of your body because it will not expand unless you apply an intensely hot acetylene flame to it. Lithium will expand and explode in ordinary room temperature. It cannot be kept in its metallic state unless immersed in oil. If you touch an ordinary match to a white-hot flame, quickly consumes it at the cost of a lot of oxygen. Sodium will burst into flame without a match. Just throw it in water. The resultant flame does not absorb water. It expands the oxygen in it and sends it back into its cathode, zero, where all dead things go. It bursts into flame. Flame destroys. It does not absorb. A lesser heat than a flame expands toward death, even though it may not destroy. In this connection, the Atomic Energy Commission issued a report to the effect that the first atomic submarine, the Nautilus, had now been in operation 2 years without a single illness from radioactive poison taking place. Here is an inference that the atomic submarine has been proved safe. Is it? 1 year ago, the second atomic submarine, the Seawolf, was launched. It is now known that its liquid sodium power system cannot be prevented from leakage and has to be removed. If 1,000 such ships sailed the seas and each lost even a very little of such poison, it would so utterly change the percentage of sodium in the ocean that no fish could survive it. We have now given our 2 main reasons for believing that the humans who are thus dealing with death do not know the deadly nature of these killer metals, nor do they know that their power to kill lies in their power to expand every other atom or cell of matter which they come in contact with. It is that very power which makes them valuable and necessary in our own environment. Their ability to expand and kill granite, basalt, and other rock formations gives to Earth the few feet of decayed soil, atmosphere, and water necessary for organic life. The following extracts from the National Academy of Sciences are the findings and opinions of 145 leading scientists who met for the purpose of studying the problem under a financial grant from the Rockefeller Foundation. The problems of radiation fall naturally into two main classes: the effects on human beings and the various ways in which radiation can reach human beings through the environment. The inheritance mechanism is by far the most sensitive to radiation of any biological system. Any radiation which reaches the reproductive cells causes mutations, changes in the material governing heredity, that are passed on to succeeding generations. Human gene mutations which produce observable effects are believed to be universally harmful. Everyone is subjected to the natural background radiation which causes an unavoidable quantity of so-called spontaneous mutations. Anything that adds radiation to that naturally occurring background rate causes further mutations and is genetically harmful. There is no minimum amount of radiation which must be exceeded before mutations occur. Any amount, however small, that reaches the reproductive cells can cause a correspondingly small number of mutations. The more radiation, the more mutations. The harm is cumulative. The genetic damage done by radiation builds up as the radiation is received and depends on the total accumulated gonad dose received by people from their own conception to the conception of their last child. So far as individuals are concerned, not all mutant genes or combinations of mutant genes are equally harmful. A few may cause very serious handicaps, many others may produce much smaller harm, or even no apparent damage. But from the point of view of the total and eventual damage of the entire population, every mutation causes roughly the same amount of harm. This is because mutant genes can only disappear when the inheritance line in which they are carried dies out. In cases of severe and obvious damage, this may happen in the first generation. In other cases, it may require hundreds of generations. Thus, for the general population, and in the long run, a little radiation to a lot of people is as harmful as a lot of radiation to a few, since the total number of mutant genes can be the same in the two cases. It is difficult to arrive at a figure showing how much genetic harm radiation can do. One measure is the amount of radiation above the natural background, which would produce as many mutations again as occur spontaneously. It is estimated that this amounts to 30 to 80 roentgens, roentgens. I have no idea how to pronounce that. The roentgen is a unit of radiation. To give an idea of its value, the average dental x-ray delivers 5 roentgens to the patient's jaw, but only 5,000th of a roentgen of stray radiation to more remote parts of the body, such as the gonads. It is estimated that a dose of 10 roentgens to every person in the United States would cause something in the order of 5 million mutant genes, which would then be a part of the population's inheritance pool. This figure is subject to considerable uncertainty. At present, the United States population is exposed to radiation from, number 1, the natural background, number 2, medical and dental X-rays, number 3, fallout from atomic weapons testing. The 30-year dose to the gonads received by the average person from each of these sources is estimated as follows. Background, about 4.3 rotogens. X-ray and fluoroscopy, about 3 rotogens. Weapons test, if continued at the rate of the past 5 years, would give a probable 30-year dose of about 0.1 rotogens. This figure may be off by a factor of 5, that is, the possible range is from 0.02 to 0.5 rotogens. If tests were conducted at the rate of the 2 most active years, 1953 and 1955, the 30-year dose would be about twice as great as that just stated. I want to interject here that I'm not going to read quite all of this chapter because this was back in 1953 and 55, and we're here in the year of 2014, and so some of this isn't perhaps pertinent to today. And I've read some of this, and in this chapter it goes into different happenings where people were exposed and what happened to them. And I'm going to just skip down through here. Well, I will. We have this problem now with people getting rid of radiation. How Oak Ridge gets rid of its refuge. Although its waste problem does not compare with Hanford's in volume, Oak Ridge still pours 50,000 gallons of highly active refuge into its underground tanks every week. Another 5 million gallons of less active rubbish also must be disposed of. Because Oak Ridge is located in a remote region, the disposal of less active waste is not a minor worry. But getting rid of the highly radioactive rubbish is harder. Teams of scientists headed by Dr. Z.K. Morgan, director of the Health Physics Division of the National Laboratory, believe they have an answer for final disposal of the dangerous, long-lived refuge at Oak Ridge, if not in all other parts of the country. 2 huge pits were bulldozed out of a hillside above White Oak Lake, and large amounts of very hot waste were poured in. The theory was that the radioactive fission products would be trapped by the fine particles of shale underlying the pits. Any small amounts of hot stuff that seeped through would be diluted in the waters of the lake. Test wells were drilled to detect movement of the rubbish through the ground. At the end of 2 months, only one waste element had penetrated through to one well. It is no secret today that a hydrogen war, no matter who starts it or who is attacked, will mean the destruction of most of the human race. One of our own high-ranking generals has stated publicly that a hydrogen attacked by our forces might take the lives of 300 or 400 million people, enemy or ally, depending on the direction of the winds. What is not so well known, but what could be equally disastrous, is a possible slow degeneration of the human race caused by radioactive poisons released during times of peace. Here is a substance you can neither feel, see, hear, taste, nor smell. You may be exposed to it unwittingly. You may inhale it or absorb it by drinking polluted water or by eating contaminated food. You may not feel any immediate ill effects, yet some materials remain radioactive for years in the body, operating as so many infinitesimal but dangerous X-ray machines. No amount of man-made radiation, external or internal, is good for healthy living things. Any amount of exposure does some harm, however slight. Radiation is cumulative and irreversible. To put it very unscientifically, you have just so much radiation tolerance, and every time you are subjected to X-rays or any other kind of man-made radiation, you have drawn against your total allowance. Some people have more tolerance than others, but ideally, the quantity of total body radiation to what a human being is exposed during his lifetime should not be greater than that to which he is subjected from the sun, stars, and planets, and radiation arising from the minerals in the Earth's surface. There is no such thing as a peaceful use of atomic energy, if by peaceful you mean harmless. Even the byproducts of a peaceful nuclear reactor could be used in one form or another for military purposes. Radiation inside atomic plants are dangerous. Air escaping from the plants can become contaminated. If water is used to shield or cool the plant, it can become contaminated. The waste materials, the byproducts of nuclear fission, are radioactive, some materials remaining highly dangerous for centuries. The more people exposed to radiation, the more damage to generations yet unborn. For years, many groups of scientists in many parts of the world have issued appeals for a cessation of atomic explosions on the grounds that the fallout of radioactive material gradually is poisoning the earth. Because of the cloud of secrecy surrounding the military facts of atomic energy, and because some of these scientific groups are politically suspect, many of these appeals have been reported in the daily press as political rather than scientific discussions. A careful study of the official reports of our own authorities, however, should convince anyone that sooner or later the atomic powers will have to stop releasing poisonous material in the atmosphere. If they do not stop, and stop completely, they will have achieved mutual annihilation, just as surely as though they had engaged in actual all-out hydrogen warfare. What is more, even if all bomb tests were stopped tomorrow, it is estimated that the main part of the poisonous materials that already have been released into the upper atmosphere will not have fallen on us until 1970, and there will be a continuation of this noxious rain long after that. Some of this material is so old, I'm going to go down and get out of this chapter. Because we know so much more, I think, about this. But people still tend to want to use nuclear power. Well, this is kind of interesting here. If the West forgoes use of nuclear weapons, it will be hopelessly inferior on land to the Soviet Union in Europe and to the Communist China in Asia. Both these powers have enormous armies that the West cannot match. The West is not even trying to match them. but as the recent British defense decision showed, is reducing armies in favor of nuclear weapons. But if the Western powers adhere to their policy of basing their defense on nuclear weapons, in the hope of thus preventing war, they will risk playing into the hands of Soviet propaganda and causing the vast, uncommitted Middle East and Far East to believe the West is responsible for a nuclear arms race. At the same time, the Western governments probably will face growing criticism from their own people, who fear not only a nuclear war, but even the periodic nuclear bomb tests that contaminate the atmosphere that people breathe and the plants and animals they eat. And now the politics is so different than back then. I'm going through this because it doesn't seem to be pertinent. This is ancient news here. So, we'll read the prelude to part 2. In the heart of every man is the desire for love, for happiness, peace, and prosperity. In the hearts of nations of men in the one world, desire for international unity. Universal brotherhood is the ultimate world goal. How far are we from that goal? The distance is far ahead for the human race. Its distance is measurable only by the yardstick of love, and love has not yet entered the doorway of human relations, and will not until unity opens the door for it to come in. Unity means oneness. Unity balances the matehood of all pairs of people and equalizes their transactions in giving and re-giving. Civilization has not yet progressed to the point where unity, through the giving and re-giving of love, can ever be comprehended by more than a few of man's millions. Man's greatest lesson is to learn how to give. We are still in the barbaric age of taking, of even taking life. The spiritual age is dawning, however. Its doors are slightly ajar, but that is all, for our world house is erected upon the sands of disunity. The product of disunity is fear, a house divided against itself by disunity and fear must fall. Peace, happiness, and prosperity cannot enter a divided house of fear. If you now ask when peace, happiness, and prosperity will come to man, we say to you that it will come when the light of love unites all men as one, and that shall come to pass only when man ceases to create fear.